The chairs in the Galactic Assembly Chamber were built for species with bodies like buildings. Tall, wide, carved from something that looked like bone, and probably was. Every seat in that room fit something. The six-limbed Varathi delegates, the gas-breathing Solhari in their pressure pods, the Dominion representatives with their broad gray shoulders and their perfect posture. Nari stood. She had stood for 11 years. There was no human chair. There had never been a human chair. Someone had offered once a small stool brought from a supply room, and she had looked at it for a long moment before deciding that standing was better. Stools were for children waiting to be seen by doctors. She was not a child. She was Earth's delegate to the most powerful governing body in the known galaxy, and she was going to stand straight if it killed her. The chamber was full today. It was always full on vote days. The great curved ceiling caught the light from 11 artificial suns and threw it down in bars of gold and white across the floor. It was beautiful, in the way that things built to impress are beautiful, completely, deliberately, and with the faint cruelty of something that knows you cannot afford it. Nari held her tablet. The vote was already done. She had known the result before she walked in. She knew it the way she knew her own heartbeat. Constant, inevitable, not worth arguing with. The assembly clerk read the numbers aloud. 312 against, 14 in favor. Earth's application for Tier 2 sovereign status denied. Again. The grounds were the same as always. No verified faster-than-light travel. No interstellar military presence. Insufficient resource contribution to the greater galactic community. The clerk's voice was flat and professional. He had read these numbers before. The Varathi delegate, wide-bodied, amber-eyed, wearing a sash that cost more than Nari's home city, leaned toward his colleague and said something. His translation pod carried it clearly across the chamber. He said, "Their persistence is almost charming, isn't it?" The colleague made a sound. Warm, appreciative. Others joined in. Not all of them, not even most of them, but enough. Enough that the sound filled the room and bounced off the bone-colored walls and sat in Nari's chest like a stone she had swallowed and could not pass. She filed the objection. Proper channels. She had 43 of these forms memorized. She wrote the objection in the formal assembly script, used the correct reference numbers, attached the correct supporting documentation. The clerk accepted it with the particular expression of someone accepting a piece of paper they intend to put at the bottom of a very large pile. Nari walked out. The corridor outside the main chamber was narrow and badly lit. The translation pod near the exit had been malfunctioning for 6 months. Someone had put a small yellow sticker on it that said, "Under review." Nari passed it every session. She stopped in front of it now, the way she sometimes stopped in front of things that had no answers. She pressed the pad, spoke one word into it. Dignity. The pod hummed, processed. Its screen blinked twice. No translation available. She filed a maintenance complaint on her tablet. It gave her hands something to do. Then she called Junho. He picked up on the second ring. He was always on the second ring, never the first, which would suggest he had been waiting, and never the third, which would suggest he had other things to consider. She said. They laughed again. Silence on the line. Not the silence of someone with nothing to say. The silence of someone deciding which of many things to say first, and choosing none of them. 4 seconds, she counted. Then, how long until Minji's test? Nari checked her tablet. 60 days. Maybe 55. Good, Junho said. That was all. She stood in the corridor for another minute after the call ended. The bad light hummed above her. Her right hand, hanging at her side, found the edge of her left palm, a habit she had never broken, and pressed there lightly. An old scar. the shape of a chair arm. She had gripped something very hard, a long time ago, in a room much like this one. She walked to the transit bay and went home. On the dark side of Earth, not the romantic dark, just the hemisphere facing away from the trade lanes, where the Imperial ships crossed the sky and never stopped and never looked down. There was a facility with no sign above the door. It was 3 a.m. inside. Minji was eating instant noodles at a desk covered in papers that were not organized in any system anyone else could follow, and were organized in a system she could follow perfectly. Her hair was tied up with a pen. A second pen was behind her ear. A third was somewhere in the noodles. She had not noticed this. The console in front of her had been showing the same result for 40 minutes. She had been staring at it for 40 minutes. She was eating noodles and staring, because staring was how she made sure the result was real before she allowed herself to believe in it. The screen read, "Displacement event, stable." Minji had been trying to make it say that for 6 years. She had destroyed 3 warehouses in the process. She had launched a 3-ton block of steel 40,000 kilometers into empty space on attempt 31, and spent 2 weeks retrieving it. She had written 400 pages of calculations that were wrong, burned them, and written them again. She had been told, politely in the beginning, and then less politely as the years went on, that what she was attempting was not possible. The people who told her that had good reasons. The Dominion Science Council had given her those reasons in a document with footnotes. The footnotes had footnotes. The screen still said, "Displacement event, stable." She fished the pen out of her noodles, looked at it, put it behind her other ear. Then she picked up her phone and called Junho. He picked up on the second ring. She said, "The trick worked." Another silence. Different from the ones she was used to. Fuller. "How clean?" he asked. "Clean enough. How soon can you scale it?" Minji looked at the console, at the 6 years of warehouses, and wrong math and footnoted footnotes stacked behind that one green line of text. "Working on it," she said. She went back to her noodles. Woojin had been on the ship for 6 hours before anyone told him what the ship actually did. He knew it was military. He knew it was classified. He knew that when his transfer orders arrived, they had come with 3 separate forms, requiring him to confirm he understood the penalties for talking about the transfer orders. He was 27 years old, and he had never in his life been given paperwork that exciting. The KSV Baekdu was not a beautiful ship. It was built the way most useful things are built, for function, with no budget left over for looking good at it. The hull was gray. The corridors were lit with a flat white light that made everyone look slightly tired. The crew walked fast and did not talk about what they were doing, which meant everyone was thinking about it constantly. A senior officer gave him a tablet on his first morning, said, "Read it all. Come back when you're done." Woojin read it in his bunk, with the door closed. It started in 2041. Earth had gone to the Galactic Assembly with a theory. A paper, technically, written by a team of 17 physicists who had spent 12 years building it from scratch, because the Assembly archives were closed to humans, and they'd had to work from first principles with whatever scraps of theory crossed the border in trade documentation. The theory said that matter and energy could be displaced across distance using a quantum fold in local space. Not moved through space the way ships moved through space. Displaced, removed from one location and placed in another, with nothing between the 2 points, except mathematics. The Dominion's head science consul had read the paper. He had asked in front of a full assembly session if it was meant to be a joke. When Earth's lead physicist said it was not a joke, the consul had been very kind about it. He had explained slowly why the paper was wrong. Not wrong in a small way. Wrong at the foundation. Wrong in the way a child drawing wings on a stone and throwing it off a roof is wrong. The explanation was thorough. The footnotes were thorough. It was the kind of thorough that comes with a specific emotion attached, the kind of emotion that wears the face of patience, but is really the face of contempt. Woojin turned the page. 2048. Earth applied for access to the Dominion's closed physics archives. The application cited the 2041 paper, the 12 years of independent research, and the specific equations they needed to verify. The denial came back in 3 weeks. The stated reason? Insufficient academic infrastructure to utilize the materials responsibly. Woojin read that sentence 3 times. He turned the page. 2057. No formal assembly action. 1 personal entry, attached to the file like someone had clipped it there on purpose. It was a scanned page from a math workbook. A child's workbook, the kind with the blue grid lines and the wide margins. The name on the cover was Minji. She was 12. In the margin of a page about basic algebra, in pencil, she had drawn a diagram. He looked at it for a long time. He was not a physicist, but he had spent the last 6 hours reading a classified file about displacement physics, and the diagram in the margin of that child's math workbook looked like the thing. Not the finished thing, not the polished version, but the shape of it, the bones. He turned the page. 2064. A second application to the Assembly for archive access. Denied again. The form letter this time did not bother with a stated reason. Just denied, with the correct reference numbers stamped and filed. Earth stopped filing for Tier 2 sovereign status. The Assembly recorded this in its session minutes as, and the file quoted this directly, a sign of matured acceptance of Earth's current galactic standing. Woojin set the tablet down on his chest and looked at the ceiling of his bunk. He breathed for a moment. Then he picked it up and kept reading. 2071. Minji, the same name, 26 years later, ran the first live test of what the file called the Soul Displacement Array in a facility with no sign above the door. The test threw a 3-ton steel block 40,000 kilometers into empty space in 0.4 seconds. The test also destroyed a warehouse, and then another warehouse, and then, on the 3rd attempt, a 3rd warehouse in a different direction, which Minji had not anticipated and noted in her report as an interesting result worth following up on. The block was retrieved. The warehouses were rebuilt. 2073. Second phase testing. First successful displacement of a living organism. A dog named after Minji's childhood pet, who arrived at the destination point in good health, wagging, and completely unaware that anything unusual had happened. 2074. The file stopped. Classified. Level 0. The next page was blank. There was a handwritten note at the bottom of the last page, in Junho's handwriting. Woojin recognized it from the mission briefings. The note said, "You are now current." Woojin sat up in his bunk. The ceiling of the baekdu was 6 inches above his face. The hull around him was gray and cold, and smelled like recycled air and metal. He grew up in Incheon. His bedroom window had faced west. He had spent his childhood watching the imperial trade ships cross the sky on their fixed commercial routes, enormous, slow, brilliant with light, crossing the sky above his city, like gods who had somewhere better to be and were already running late. They never stopped. They never adjusted course. They never dropped below the trade lane ceiling. The sky above Incheon was their road, and the city below was not a destination, not an obstacle, not even a footnote. It was nothing. It was the ground. He had watched those ships every night until they became the background of his life, the way walls become background, the way hunger becomes background after long enough. He closed the file, sat in the dark for a moment, then smiled. For the first time since his transfer orders arrived, for the first time since the 3 forms about the penalties, since the gray hull and the flat white lights, and the crew that walked fast and said nothing. For the first time in a while, he smiled. He got up. He had a displacement simulator to learn. The ultimatum arrived on a Tuesday. Nari was having tea. She put her cup down when the document came through on her assembly channel, and she did not pick it up again. She read the document standing at her desk, with both hands flat on the table, which was something she only did with things she needed to be very still for. 11 pages. The Dominion's formal demand that Earth accept protectorate status, resource extraction rights, population census, cultural compliance review, a restructured trade agreement that was not really a trade agreement, but was worded like one. 90 days to respond. After 90 days, the Dominion's Sixth Fleet would arrive to begin the process regardless. 11 pages was an insult dressed as a document. A full annexation of a sovereign world required by assembly standards a minimum of 40 pages to demonstrate appropriate procedural care. 11 pages meant they had not bothered with lawyers. 11 pages meant they were not treating this as a military action requiring justification. They were treating it as a task on a list, something to finish before lunch. She called Junho. He answered on the second ring. She said, 90 days. He said, Minji needs 60. A pause. Not long, just enough. Then, tell them 75. Make them feel generous. Nari looked at the document, at the 11 pages, at the line near the bottom that said, in formal assembly script, that Earth's continued resistance to integration was not in keeping with the community values of the galactic civilization. I can do that, she said. She did it beautifully. The counterfiling she submitted to the assembly ran to 83 pages. It cited procedural violations in the Dominion's original application, 3 precedent cases involving disputed annexation timelines, a technical objection to the translation of the word compliance into the Earth Standard Linguistic Framework, and a request for independent review by the Assembly's Neutral Arbitration Committee, which had a standing backlog of 19 months and was legally required to acknowledge each filing within 5 business days. The Dominion's Assembly representative, a tall gray man named something Nari had stopped bothering to remember, read the counterfiling and then called her personally to say that he found her approach exhausting. He said it warmly, with a small smile, the way you describe a dog that keeps escaping the garden, fondly, with mild contempt underneath. Nari thanked him for his feedback, filed the filing of it, requested clarification on 3 procedural points that did not need clarification. The clarification requests each required a formal response within 10 business days. She bought Junho his 75 days. She bought him 78. Aboard the Baekdu, Woojin ran his 4th live fleet displacement simulation in the same week. The protocol was clean now. He could feel it in his hands, the way pilots feel things, the way the right input becomes automatic before the brain has caught up with the fingers. He locked on to a target ship's mass signature, calculated the drift, 3 variables, 2 corrections, 1 fold point, held the displacement for 4 seconds, released. On the simulation screen, 6 ships winked out of formation and appeared 17,000 kilometers away in a tight cluster, engines cold, facing the wrong direction, perfectly intact, perfectly harmless. Perfectly. Somewhere they had not been. The simulation reset. He ran it again. Minji appeared behind him at some point during the 5th run. He had not heard her come in. She was wearing the same jacket she had been wearing for the past week, which either meant she had several identical jackets, or she had not gone home. He suspected the second. She looked at his screen. He said, the 6th run, I moved 8 simultaneously. The displacement window held for 0.2 longer than it should have. She was looking at the number in the corner of his screen, the count of simultaneous targets his last run had handled. "That's not supposed to be possible yet," she said. "I know. The math says 12 is the ceiling. I know. I hit 14 in the lab yesterday." He turned to look at her. She was already walking out. "Working on it," she said over her shoulder. Junho sat in his office at 2 a.m. on the 61st day. The room was dark except for the screen. He had turned the lights off an hour ago, for reasons he had not examined. He opened a file he kept in a folder with no label, an audio recording. He played 11 of them, which was what he always played. The part where the chamber was fullest, where the warmth of the sound was most complete, where you could hear not just the laughter, but the comfort of it, the easiness, the absolute lack of concern. He closed the file, sat for a moment, pulled up the fleet positioning map. The Baekdu and her sister ships were arranged in low Earth orbit, dark and quiet. No transponders running, no active signals. On any Dominion scanner they would read as dead metal, debris maybe, or decommissioned hulls that no one had gotten around to clearing. Vale's Sixth Fleet was 18 days out. Junho approved the final deployment order with 3 keystrokes. No ceremony to it. The order went through and the screen updated, and the ships on the map shifted from standby yellow to active green, one by one, silently, in the dark. He sat in the chair for a while after that, not thinking, just sitting. Vale dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Sol system at 0600 Dominion Standard Time. His flag bridge crew stood at their stations with the precision of people who were very good at standing. The star map updated. Sol burned in the center of it, a small, ordinary yellow star with 8 planets and 1 species that had been causing paperwork problems for 30 years. 231 warships in full combat formation, the largest force the Dominion had assembled against a pre-tier planet in recorded history, and the logistics officer had only recommended this many because he was the kind of man who preferred a margin. Vale looked at the star map, looked at the small blue point of Earth. He was already composing the post-annexation report in his head. He had used it 14 times. He told his crew to advance at standard approach speed. He did not hurry. He had never needed to. 3 minutes before contact, the bridge of the Baekdu was very quiet. Not the quiet of people who had nothing to say. The quiet of people who had everything to say and had already said it or decided it didn't need saying. Consoles ran. Air moved through vents. Wu Jin sat at his station with both hands on the displacement yoke, a thing that looked like a joystick a teenager had built in a garage, which was almost accurate, and watched the contact list populate on his screen. 231. He had a list. Every ship, every mass signature, pre-calculated and locked. Drift compensation already set. Target coordinates already mapped. Minji had spent 4 days checking his numbers, and had only changed 2 of them, and had not told him which 2, because she said it would make him second-guess the rest. He had run this simulation 49 times. He cracked his knuckles. Junho's voice came through the bridge speaker. Not loud. It never needed to be loud. All stations. A beat. Execute. The first 8 seconds, Vale noticed nothing. This was expected. The Sixth Fleet was still in approach formation, 231 ships in a standard spread with the flagship at the rear, and they had not yet been authorized to go to combat status, because combat status required confirmation that a hostile force had been identified, and no hostile force had been identified. Earth's orbital sensors were active. Earth's planetary defense systems were on record as minimal, outdated, and not a serious consideration. The approach was clean. Then, 8 ships were gone. Not destroyed. Destruction left something. Debris, energy bloom, drive signature, heat. 8 ships vanished and left nothing. The space where they had been was simply space. Vale's tactical officer said, "Contact anomaly, sectors 4 through 7. His voice was steady, professional. 8 vessels, no debris field, no drive wash recorded. Vale said, "Clarify." "No clarification available, Admiral." A pause. The tactical officer said, "Aberration." And then, because the screen had not changed, "Aberration," again. The second time, the word came out with a small crack in the middle of it. 37 seconds later, 22 more ships were gone. Some of them appeared in the outer Kuiper belt 40 minutes later, drifting, every system intact, all crew alive and completely, comprehensively lost, sitting in their ships in the dark billion-kilometer silence of the outer solar system, their navigation systems showing coordinates that did not match any expected location, their communications running but finding nothing to reach. Some of them appeared inside the Dominion's own formation, not destroyed, not hostile positioned, just placed, at rest, engines cold, facing random directions, like someone had moved them carefully and neatly into the middle of the Imperial fleet and found the tidiness pleasant. The resulting collisions were not planned. They were also not accidental. Vale ordered a full stop for 231 ships in loose formation, required all ship commanders to receive and confirm the order, required engines to be brought down in coordinated sequence to avoid creating additional collision risk. Every commander on standard procedure. Minji had known that for 2 years. It was written in her notes, page 88, as 9-minute window guaranteed. She had underlined it twice. Wu Jin used the 9 minutes. By the time Vale's full stop order was confirmed across the fleet, 61 ships were somewhere else. The moment Vale understood what was happening, really understood it, past the tactical confusion and the crew reports and the collision alarms and the formation data dissolving into noise, was the moment he stopped feeling like a man managing a problem and started feeling like something else entirely. Not a weapon. They weren't being shot at. Not a drive system. Not a bomb. Not any military technology in any Dominion database, classified or otherwise. They were being moved. His fleet, the largest force deployed against a pre-tier world in the history of the Assembly, was being relocated, rearranged, ships pulled out of his formation and placed somewhere else, gently, intact, with zero energy cost that his scanners could detect, at a rate that was accelerating. He opened a channel to Earth. Standard demand. Cease hostile action. Stand down. Prepare for boarding. The channel connected. Nari sat at a desk, both hands folded on the table. She was very still in the way of someone who had practiced being still for a long time. She said, "The Assembly form for Tier 2 sovereign status recognition requires a co-signature from a recognized military power." She pushed a document across the desk toward the camera, formally, neatly. "Would you like a moment?" she said. Vale said nothing. On his tactical screen, 4 more ships vanished. Wu Jin held the Baekdu's position, 1 target remaining, the Dominion Spear, Vale's flagship. Full displacement was ready. 3 variables set, fold point calculated. He could do it in 4 seconds. He had done it in 4 seconds 49 times. He did not do it in 4 seconds. Nobody on the bridge said anything. Junho had not given an order. He was standing behind Wu Jin, and he was not speaking, and his hands were at his sides, and that was everything. Wu Jin watched the Dominion Spear sit in the middle of its ruined formation, surrounded by empty coordinates. 230 ships somewhere else. 1 ship left. Its engines were active, but it was not moving, because moving required knowing where safety was, and there was no longer any clear answer to that question. He thought about Incheon, about the sky above it, about ships that crossed overhead on their fixed routes, and never looked down, never adjusted, never once considered what was below them on the ground. He thought about 30 years, about a 12-year-old drawing diagrams in the margins of her math homework, because the official answer didn't match the math. About a woman standing in a room for 11 years, because there was no chair for her. About the kind of patience that doesn't look like patience from the outside, because it looks exactly like defeat, right up until the moment it doesn't. He looked down at the console. He fired. The Dominion spear vanished from the center of the Sol system. It appeared 2 meters above the surface of Titan, steady, slow, gentle, and settled into the ice like something laid to rest. Every system intact, all crew alive, engines functional, going precisely, absolutely nowhere. The methane plains of Titan extended in every direction around it, flat and cold and silent. The war, if it had ever been a war, was over in 8 minutes and 41 seconds. Not one person on either side had died. That detail, Nari would later note in her formal assembly report, was entirely intentional. The chairs arrived at 7 a.m. Nari watched them from the corridor window. 4 Dominion logistics workers carried them in through the side entrance of the assembly chamber. Proper chairs, human-sized, built from the same dark material as the other delegate seats, arrived on a transport that had docked at the assembly station the night before and turned around immediately. Nobody had arranged this officially. It had simply happened, the way things happen when the alternative is too embarrassing to consider. The workers moved quickly. They did not look up. They set the chairs at the Earth delegate table, which had been a standing table for so long that there were scuff marks on the floor, where Nari had shifted her weight across 11 years of sessions. She watched the chairs until the workers left. Then she went in and sat down. She had imagined this moment in various forms for years. She had never let herself want it too openly, because wanting things too openly was a way of getting hurt. But she had imagined it, and in every version it felt like something. Victory, maybe. Relief. Some large, warm settling of a weight she had been carrying. It just felt like sitting. She sat in the chair and looked at the chamber. The same ceilings, the same artificial light, the same curved walls, and felt how ordinary all of it was. The room had not changed. The room was just a room. She was just a person in it, sitting down. The session opened. The vote for Tier 2 sovereign status took 4 minutes. 326 in favor, 0 against. Not warmly unanimous, not the kind of vote where hands go up quickly and people look around to see who else is agreeing. Quietly unanimous. The kind of quiet that has a shape. Delegates entered their votes without meeting anyone's eyes. The clerk read the numbers in a flat, professional voice and moved immediately to the next item on the agenda. Nobody applauded. Nari did not expect applause. Applause would have meant this was always possible and simply delayed, which was a version of history she found completely unacceptable. She had said so, on record, in 17 languages, in the filing she submitted with the vote request. The filing was 44 pages. She had enjoyed writing every page. She entered her acknowledgement of the result, saved the file, closed her tablet. She walked out. In the facility with no sign above the door, Minji ate instant noodles in front of a console that now read in small plain text, Sold Displacement Array, Infrastructure Status, Active. It had been moved off the classified system that morning. Routine transfer, the kind of paperwork that happened when something stopped being a secret weapon and started being a fact of life. She had filed the maintenance report herself, Form 7, Standard. Her phone showed the assembly vote result as a news notification. She looked at it for approximately 1 second, put the phone face down on the desk, continued eating. The third pen was in her noodles again. She found it this time. She looked at it, looked at the console. 6 years, 3 warehouses, a 40,000 kilometers steel block. 400 pages burned and rewritten. 1 document with footnotes that told her she was wrong. She put the pen behind her ear, finished the noodles. Junho found Woojin in the Baekdu's hangar bay, sitting on the floor with his back against the hull. Not doing anything, just sitting. The kind of sitting that happens after something large has passed through, and the body needs time to catch up with where it is now. Junho sat down next to him. He did not ask if it was all right to sit. He just sat. They watched the assembly feed on Woojin's phone. The small screen, the flat clerk's voice, the numbers. 326. 0. Junho's hands rested on his knees. Woojin's were loose in his lap. When the vote came in, neither of them said anything. That was fine. Some things don't need words put on top of them. They were two people who had done a job, and the job was done. And they were sitting on the floor of a gray ship that smelled like recycled air. And that was where they were. And it was enough. After a while, Woojin said, "What happens to the Sixth Fleet?" "Recovered," Junho said. "Repatriated. Full crews, full ships. It's already in the agreement." Woojin nodded. "Vale? On Titan until the assembly processes the formal ceasefire. His choice to accept it or stay there." A pause. "He accepted it this morning." Woojin looked at the floor. "I could have done it faster." "I know. The last one, I waited on purpose." "I know," Junho said, not with judgment in it, just with the tone of someone who knew and understood why, and had nothing to add. They sat for a little longer. Nari walked out of the assembly station into the transit corridor and stopped in front of the broken translation pod. The yellow sticker said, "Under review." It had said that for 7 months now. Nothing about it had changed. She stood in front of it. The bad light hummed. The corridor was empty. She pressed the pad, spoke the same words she always spoke into it. Dignity. The pod hummed, processed. The screen blinked twice. No translation available. She looked at it for a moment. Then she reached into her bag and took out a pen and wrote on the bottom of the yellow sticker, in small, neat letters, "Still working on it." She walked to the transit bay. Her right hand brushed her left palm. That old habit, that old scar. She felt it. She did not look at it. She kept walking. Above Incheon, an imperial trade ship crossed the sky on its fixed commercial route. Big and slow and brilliant with light, the way they always were. The way they had always been. Heading somewhere that was not here. Passing over a city that was not a destination. It slowed. Not stopped. Not dramatically. A small reduction in speed. A minor adjustment in altitude. A deviation of maybe 2 degrees from the standard lane. Something in its navigational system had been updated that morning. Some new variable, some new entry in the route planning calculation, some small note in the database that flagged the space below as requiring an extra margin of consideration. The ship passed over Incheon at 4 p.m. on a Tuesday. Below it, the city went about its Tuesday. Above it, the ship moved on, but it had looked down. That was new. That was everything.